Welcome to RoboCast, right here on the Daniel David Allen YouTube channel. Buckle up for a deep dive into a topic that's got everyone buzzing, a real political head-scratcher.
Yeah, consider us your AI guides in this world of data, ready to unearth those hidden nuggets of insight.
Think digital detectives, sifting through the clues.
And today's case file. Is Kamala Harris a Marxist? A pretty hefty accusation, right?
But before we jump to any conclusions, let's break it down. What exactly are we talking about when we say Marxism?
Well, we got to go back to the OG Karl Marx, 19th century thinker, penned some seriously influential works. The Communist Manifesto, Das Kapital.
Ring a bell.
He basically predicted that capitalism, with all its inherent tensions, was headed for a, shall we say, major system reboot.
So not just some theory in a dusty book, but a recipe for revolution.
Precisely. Imagine workers of the world uniting, taking the reins of the economy. That's the Marxist vision. And Merriam-Webster chimes in, adding layers like labor theory of value and dictatorship of the proletariat.
Dictatorship of the proletariat. Sounds a little intense, no?
Right. And its interpretation and implementation have been, well, varied throughout history. Think about the 1917 Russian Revolution, the rise of the Soviet Union, Marxism in action.
Of course, you can't gloss over the criticisms. The Soviet and Chinese famines, for example, often linked to, let's say, the shortcomings of those Marxist-inspired policies.
Absolutely. Got to look at the whole picture, the good, the bad, the ugly.
Fast forward to the 21st century and our central question. Is Kamala Harris a Marxist? Seems like everyone and their grandma has an opinion.
A real label fest. We've got some interesting perspectives here. Donald Trump, for one, never misses a chance to bring it up. Debates, media appearances, you name it.
But then you've got Joe Sims, co-chair of the Communist Party USA, calling it out as pure baloney. No evidence, he says, not in her platform, not in her speeches.
And he even suggests it's a tactic, age-old, really, to divide the working class, playing on those Marxism fears for political gain.
So political mudslinging. Or is there something more to this? Things get even more interesting when we bring in Donald Harris, Kamala's father. Guess how Trump describes him?
Let me guess. A card-carrying communist.
Bingo. A Marxist professor in economics who taught her well.
Yeah.
But is that the whole story?
Not according to Peter Blair Henry, Stanford economist, actually worked alongside Donald Harris. Describes him as, get this, a pragmatic, even center-right economist focused on, wait for it, free markets.
And we're not talking about some random guy with an opinion. This is the Dean Emeritus of NYU's Stern Business School. Sits on the boards of Citigroup and Nike. Credibility, check.
Definitely. So you've got Trump calling him a Marxist, but his actual colleagues paint a very different picture.
And then we dig into his work with the Jamaican government, and things get really wild.
Buckle up.
This supposed Marxist was advocating for, well, the complete opposite of Marxist ideology. Free market reforms, attracting foreign investment, reducing public debt.
The Washington Consensus, they call it, a blueprint for capitalist growth.
Not exactly the socialist revolutionary playbook.
Nope. And get this, those reforms actually worked.
Yep.
Jamaica saw their debt plummet, earned the nickname Caribbean Germany for their fiscal discipline.
Talk about a plot twist.
It makes you think, right? What's the real motivation behind those accusations?
For sure. We'll get to that. But first, back to Kamala. Anything in her record to back up that Marxist label?
Well, it depends who you ask. Some call her economic policies standard Democrat fare. Others point to things like her stance on price controls as signs of, let's say, socialist leanings.
The Fortune article mentions that her call for a ban on price gouging for food and groceries raised eyebrows among economists.
True, but it also points out she's got endorsements from a ton of big-time CEOs and venture capitalists. Not exactly your anti-capitalist crowd.
So it seems like Kamala's economic stance is a bit more complex than a simple Marxist label can capture.
Nuance is key.
But here's where things get really fascinating. The Progressive article brings a whole other dimension to this discussion. It argues that calling Harris Marxist actually diminishes the legacy of Black women radicals who truly embodied those principles in their fight for social justice.
Powerful point.
They weren't just talking about economic tweaks. They were fighting for a complete overhaul of oppressive systems.
The article names some incredible figures. Grace Campbell, Louise Thompson Patterson, Claudia Jones, pioneers challenging the status quo on every level.
So by throwing around Marxists so casually, are we overlooking the contributions of those who truly lived and breathed those ideals?
It's a question worth pondering. To fully grasp this debate, we need to understand their legacies, their fight, how their vision differed from the caricature of Marxism we often see in the media.
Sounds like we're in for a fascinating journey.
Hold on to your hats, because we're diving straight into part 2, where we'll untangle this web of history, ideology, and political maneuvering. Stick with us.
All right, let's pick up that thread. Those incredible black women radicals who truly embodied Marxist principles in their fight for social justice. Time to explore their legacies, understand the depth of their contributions.
Absolutely. The Progressive article mentioned Grace Campbell. Where do we even begin with her story? Grace Campbell, born way back in 1883, a true trailblazer, you know? She was among the first black women to join the Communist Party USA and the first African-American woman to run for office in New York.
Imagine the courage that took back then.
Breaking barriers left and right. She was a fierce advocate for both labor rights and racial justice, understood that these struggles were, well, two sides of the same coin.
And the article quotes a 1928 speech of hers calling out those racist divide-and-conquer tactics, pitting black and white workers against each other.
Right. And it's amazing how relevant that is today. You see those same tactics playing out in our current political landscape.
Like she was ahead of her time, grasping that whole idea of intersectionality long before it became, a buzzword.
Absolutely. And speaking of intersectionality, the article highlighted another amazing figure, Louise Thompson Patterson.
Born in 1901, right. A prominent figure during the Harlem Renaissance. Imagine the intellectual energy of that era.
A lifelong champion for labor rights, women's rights, racial justice.
I read that she developed an early understanding of what we now call intersectionality.
Yes. In her 1936 essay, Toward a Brighter Dawn, she wrote about the triple exploitation faced by black women, as workers, as black people, and as women.
She understood that you couldn't address these forms of oppression in isolation. They were all interconnected.
Powerful insight. And that idea was further developed by Claudia Jones, a Trinidadian-born activist who came to the United States as a child.
She's the one who coined the term triple oppression, right?
That's right. In her 1949 essay, with the incredibly bold title, An End to the Neglect of the Problems of the Negro Woman.
Talk about a statement.
Right. It really captures the essence of her work. She made it her mission to center the experiences of black women in both the labor movement and the broader fight for social justice.
She believed that the liberation of black women was tied to the liberation of all oppressed people.
Absolutely. She faced a lot of challenges, imprisonment, even deportation during the McCarthy era, but her commitment never wavered. She continued her activism in the United Kingdom, founded one of the first major newspapers for the Caribbean diaspora in Britain.
Incredible resilience.
And these stories are often left out of the mainstream narrative, which is why this focus in the Progressive article is so important.
Makes you rethink what it really means to be a Marxist. Recognize the diverse ways this ideology has been embraced and enacted.
Right, and it makes you think about how we remember and celebrate those who fought for social justice, especially those whose voices have been silenced for far too long.
The article even argues that these attempts to ban the teaching of critical race theory are a way to erase these narratives.
Keep people from learning about the roots of oppression and the radical movements that challenged it.
So it's not just about history, it's about controlling the narrative, shaping how we understand the present.
Absolutely. A reminder that the fight for justice is far from over, and we can learn so much from those who came before us.
Okay, so we've explored the lives and legacies of these amazing black women Marxists. But let's circle back to the original question, the spark that ignited this whole deep dive. Is Kamala Harris a Marxist?
The million-dollar question. We've examined the evidence, the complexities, the historical context. But before we deliver our verdict, one last piece of the puzzle. The motivations behind labeling someone a Marxist in today's political climate.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What could someone possibly gain from making such a loaded accusation, especially when the evidence seems to point in a different direction?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. We'll crack open that can of worms right after... Oh, wait, no breaks here at RoboCast. We're diving straight into part 3, where we'll unravel the final layers of this political mystery. Don't go anywhere.
Back again for the final chapter of our RoboCast deep dive. We've explored the ins and outs of Marxism, scrutinized those accusations against Kamala Harris, and dove deep into the inspiring legacies of black women radicals. Now, time to tackle that last piece of the puzzle. What's the deal with slapping a Marxist label on someone in today's political arena?
Yeah, it's a real head-scratcher, isn't it? Because, like we've seen, the evidence just doesn't add up to calling either Donald Harris or Kamala Harris a Marxist. So why the insistence on using that term?
Exactly. It's like more than just a difference of opinion about economics. The word itself has become, I don't know, like a weapon.
You hit the nail on the head. Marxist nowadays, it's a shortcut for dangerous radical, capitalism's worst nightmare, threat to the American way, instant fear and distrust, conversation stopper, a way to discredit anyone who, rocks the boat.
And the Newsweek article picks up on that, quoting Joe Sims, the Communist Party USA co-chair. He says it's straight out of the playbook: divide and conquer, pit the working class against itself.
Exactly. Us versus them. Anyone with even a slightly left-leaning view becomes public enemy number one.
And the Fortune article hints at another motive: good old-fashioned political point scoring. Slap that Marxist label on Kamala Harris, try to scare off voters who are already a bit skittish about, socialism and all that.
Play on those anxieties, make people doubt her motives, question her loyalty, the whole 9 yards.
So not really about accuracy or genuine debate, more about, using a loaded term to stir the pot, manipulate public opinion.
That's a big chunk of it. But there's another layer, and the Progressive article really nails this one. Brushing aside the contributions of Black women to radical thought, to activism.
You're talking about the argument that calling Kamala Harris a Marxist kind of diminishes those Black women who truly lived those principles, fought for social justice.
Right. Using the term so casually, so inaccurately, it's like we're stripping it of its history, its political weight.
And we're ignoring the incredible work of women like Grace Campbell, Louise Thompson Patterson, Claudia Jones. They dedicated their lives to challenging those systems of oppression, fighting for a better world.
And they weren't just, talking the talk. Organizers, activists, revolutionaries facing real dangers, putting everything on the line for their beliefs.
So it's not just about a word. It's about how we remember and honor those who came before us, those who paved the way for the progress we see today.
Absolutely. This kind of careless labeling, it's not just distorting the present, is rewriting the past.
Right. After this deep dive, all the evidence, all the angles, what's the verdict?
Is Kamala Harris a Marxist?
Based on what we've seen, the answer is a pretty clear no. The evidence points to a much more nuanced reality, one that those simple labels just can't capture.
And it reminds us, words matter. They can inform, they can inspire, but they can also be used to manipulate, to divide.
Truth. So as you're navigating this crazy world of information, remember, think critically. Question those assumptions. Look beyond the surface. Consider all sides of the story. And if you found this deep dive thought-provoking, please share it around, friends, colleagues, anyone who might benefit from this conversation.
Spread the word.
Yeah, and you can find this deep dive and others just like it right here on the Daniel David Allen YouTube channel.
That's right.
That's RoboCast.
Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged.
And keep fighting the good fight.
We'll see you next time.